Well, for analysis on what exactly is happening in Washington right now, we're joined tonight by Congressman Jason Chaffetz of Utah. Congressman, thanks a lot for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So you heard Nancy Pelosi, the longtime Democratic leader in the House, describe Robert Mueller as not truly independent. Do you think he's truly independent?
He's as good as it gets. I mean, his credentials are impeccable. He served in the Bush administration, the Obama administration. No, he is unassailable in terms of his credentials, his background, and I think your point is well taken. He's in the latter part of his career. He has nothing to prove. He's been silent politically. It doesn't get any better than Robert Mueller if you're going to do it. I also agree that I don't think they should have actually appointed somebody.
Why did they?
I mean, I think they're feeling the political heat. Maybe they're watching a little too much television and reading too many newspapers and whatnot. But look, I have not seen any evidence of actual collusion. Where is the actual crime that they think they need a special prosecutor to prosecute? I haven't seen that. There's been a lot of flailing, but that flailing started before January 20th.
Did you expect this?
Very surprised by it. No heads up. I don't think the Speaker's office got a heads up, and I at least read online that the White House only got about 30 minutes heads up. So no, it caught us totally out of the blue. We
were supposed to have someone from the White House on tonight on another topic, and that person canceled at the last minute, and I called over there to find out why. And the explanation, and I think it was sincere, was we had no idea this was happening. We're trying to figure out how to respond to it. Now, you've seen other special counsel, special prosecutor investigations go far afield from where they started and really to tie up an entire presidency. It happened to President Reagan, it happened to famously President Clinton. Is that a concern here?
Well, nobody knows what the lanes of this special counsel are going to be. And my understanding from our counsel within the committee, they don't even need to publish that. They don't even need to share that with Congress. They have such wide latitude to go wherever they want to go. So I don't know what lane that he's going to be in, other than I have a great deal of trust that Director Mueller has the discipline to hopefully stay within the lanes, but I don't know what those lanes are.
So, and by lanes, you mean you're not exactly sure what the investigation is about? Because I'll concede, despite the fact we do this every single night, I'm not exactly sure what the investigation is about either. Is that what you're saying?
Well, so, yeah, is it about, number one, is it about, it appears to be about Russian influence on the election, and then was there any collusion? But does that seep out, and at what point does that let off? You know, for instance, the Oversight Committee, we're interested in, were there potentially these so-called Comey memos or letters, and we have invited, and are trying to invite, I should say, Director Comey to come testify. Let's hear him out. But does it involve that? I don't know. I physically don't know exactly where those lanes are.
I don't either. And we likely won't find out for some time. Is that your understanding? I mean, I don't expect that Mueller's going to be giving weekly updates on what he's looking into or finding, correct?
No, I mean, part of the challenge here is that I think he will lean on the Department of Justice and the FBI, what they've done to date, given that he used to lead that group for 10 years. And so he gets a little bit of a head start, but this could go on for years. And there could be long periods of just silence. And what I worry is that the Democrats are going to politically exploit this on a daily drumbeat, making up theories, making up stories, you know, trying to get somebody to grab onto a piece of meat and say, oh, this is true. When you don't have the definitive word from somebody who's going to be essentially silent over the next, I don't know how long, 6 months, 2 years? Right. I don't know.
Could be longer. And I would say if Mueller's keeping the best interest of the country at heart, he will not make statements, and he won't allow information to leak from this investigation. It doesn't serve anybody. It certainly doesn't serve the rest of the country. So back to something you said a second ago about trying to get former Director Comey over to the Congress to answer questions. Why would that be difficult for you?
Well, first of all, I don't have his number. I used to be able to talk to him on the phone and trade text with him every once in a while, but he doesn't have his government-issued phone. So I'm told that he at least has our number. We just issued a letter last night to the Department of Justice. I'm not even sure that these memos exist. I don't even know that they're real. But
these memos, the memos that he purportedly took along the way over his years as FBI director.
Yes.
And so first thing, why do you doubt their existence?
Well, I just don't know. I mean, even the reporter who wrote the story had not physically seen them himself. And so, you know, I think it's worthy of investigation. I do think we should pursue it. But I'm also not presupposing the outcome, and I don't even know that they exist and where they exist. Now, we've asked the Department of Justice for these documents, but I don't know if they have them or not. We gave them a week to find them and provide them, and I said if need be, I'll subpoena them, although I think the Department of Justice will be cooperative. But maybe Director Comey has them himself. I don't know. You can't run an investigation on anonymous sources in the New York Times. That's not conclusive evidence.
So the news story that kicked off this story, which is the biggest story in the world, as you know, suggested that Director Comey had written these memos, I think it uses the verb write, and that he had showed them to his colleagues there. He had passed them around internally, and that he had done so on a bunch of different occasions going back a while. So if that's true, would those be subject to subpoena from you?
Well, it do seem like they would be actual government documents. They're meeting with the president on the federal grounds. He's showing them to his colleagues. They seem to be federal records. And so that's why we believe in the Oversight Committee we have some jurisdiction here to go in and see if this is reality. And so, but again, this is all the unknown. It's the very beginning of this, but that's also why we're looking at it.
How would you know, by the way, if you asked to see these memos, that he's producing all of them or all the relevant ones?
Well, I do believe they play within the bounds of the law, and when Congress requests something. But look, we have a storied and horrific background on this. You can go from everything from Fast and Furious to the Benghazi investigation, the email, IRS, anything pretty much over the last 8 years, which I've served in Congress, and I don't believe we ever got a full production out of the Congress, or out of the Department of Justice or the State Department. And that continues, by the way. One of my frustrations, with all due respect to the Trump administration, is they have not loosened up the documents that we have been requesting for years. And yet they don't provide that. And I've got solutions on how to do that. And sometime I'll come on your show and talk about that. But it is absolutely wrong, and I have no way of necessarily verifying it 100%.
Well, talk about subverting democracy. I mean, any member of Congress, Maxine Waters, has more legitimacy than the director of the FBI. She was elected. He was not. And in a democracy, that's got to count for a lot. And so how can they possibly deny your constitutionally legitimate request to turn over documents that fall into the purview of your committee?
Here's the fundamental problem. I can issue a subpoena unilaterally. It's part of my constitutional responsibility to provide that check and balance. And I'm one of the few people that can actually issue that subpoena. But that subpoena is only as strong as its ability to be enforced. And when I try to enforce those subpoenas, guess what? You have to go back to the Department of Justice in order to get to the courts. What has to happen, what should happen, is Congress should have an expedited way to get to the courts to enforce those subpoenas. Right now, you've seen, for instance, Judicial Watch, right? Tom Fitton has much more power using a Freedom of Information Act because he can get to the courts, and the courts can force them. The judicial branch, the Department of Justice is afraid of a court. They're not afraid of Congress. And we don't use our power of our purse. We don't beat it over their head, and we don't enforce it. And so it's somewhat feckless, and it's very frustrating as somebody who's the chairman of the Oversight Committee. We can't enforce these subpoenas.
It's absolutely infuriating. And talk about subverting democracy and the intent of the founders. That's completely over the top. So do you think that the appointment of Robert Mueller as special counsel to look into this Russia question, whatever that question is, will stop the acceleration we've seen in the last week, talk of impeachment, of removing Trump somehow from office? How would it not?
No, this is not going to slow them down. Now they're just going to change their talking points. The Democrats, by the way, I love their newfound commitment to openness, transparency, and accountability. I mean, where did that come from? All of a sudden, come January 20th, they were all for it. But they're just going to change their talking points and say this administration is in chaos, and by the way, it's under investigation itself. It had to have a special counsel. You'll hear them. I mean, you could just already hear them in advance. It's an insatiable desire. They have no ideas, they have no policies, and so it's their scorched earth mentality and approach to just say, you know, let's burn it to the ground, and that's their approach.
Do you think, and since you work there and you're with them in the gym or at lunch or whatever, do you think the Democratic members we see on television alleging a conspiracy involving Trump and Putin believe that there was actual collusion between the two?
If they do, where's the evidence? I'm happy to pursue it, but I don't have anybody actually presenting me any evidence. And now that we're this many months into it, come up with something. I mean, you, last week or so, Maxine Waters, saying that somehow I was suspect, that my ties to the Kremlin. Are you kidding me? I live in Utah, for goodness sake. Come on. I mean, they are just
you can't
nonstop,
even see Russia from
no
your house,
accountability. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I can see it. It's just right out, just over the Great Salt Lake. It's right over there.
But is it, I mean, I know there's no evidence. I don't even think we know that the Russians hacked John Podesta's emails. I've talked to people on the Intel Committee who say there's actually no evidence of that. But I wonder if the people alleging this conspiracy have bought into it themselves. I know we're getting to motive, but I just can't resist asking you, do you think that some of them are sincere?
I think some of them probably want to believe it, even absent evidence. I think their sincerity is probably there, but a lot of them, I just don't. But if you try to go even an inch deep into what sort of evidence that they have, they got nothing, nothing.
Well, you'd never know that from the press conferences they hold. Congressman Chaffetz, thanks a lot for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Tucker.